I'll never forget. I walked into this parish hall that I'd walked into 1,000 times before, and comes straight up to me, and he wraps me in a hug, and he's like, "Dude, I'm so happy you're here. I'm so excited. Praise God that you came." And it's Justin Fatika, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, how many drugs is this guy on?
Welcome to the Hey Brother podcast, where Catholic men share about real struggles. I'm Nick Clooney, your host, a Catholic psych mentor and the founder of Craft It for More, a mentorship practice dedicated to helping men live more radically free lives. Each week, I sit down with a man to hear his story about how brotherhood has shaped him, the struggles he's facing, and where he wants to grow. In addition to our weekly interviews, I share conversations with my brother Mitch. Subscribe and follow so we can walk this journey together. We want your help to build a stronger, authentic Catholic brotherhood. A rocky start, but man, oh man. So let's see here. You said you've listened to a couple episodes.
Yep.
A number of episodes. Any feedback before we dive in earnest in conversation?
And you know what? I like it. One of the things I like about your podcast is there's no pretensions. There's no it's brothers being brothers with each other, you know.
Sure.
It very much reminded me of what it was like having a brotherhood in net. It very much reminded me of, and this is part of my story, but I didn't truly care about or really want brotherhood until I did net. I very much showed up at the net center thinking you know what? I'm here for God, ministry, and tiny little bit of me was like, maybe I'll meet my future wife here. Maybe. It
Right.
was not at all the the goal or the reason why I did net. But I could tell you this, having brotherhood was not on that list. And I walked away loving every aspect of men's days, brotherhood time. I so looked forward to the next chance I got to be with the guys. And a lot of that has to...
Yeah, I want you to go into that here in a minute because I know it's part of your story.
And I will.
I think it's super relatable. We don't know what that ache is in our hearts until we, sometimes it's like you don't know it until you know it. And then you see it and it's like, well, wow, that's been there for a long time. And I want you to talk about that in just a minute. But I first want to really just introduce who you are a little bit about how we got connected. And welcome people into this episode of the Hey Brother podcast. So your name's Jack, and it's Lysite.
So
Lysite,
yeah,
okay.
It's tough, trust me. And it's easy if you break it into two words: lie, like you lie to someone, and sight, like eyesight.
Yeah.
Lysite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we got connected in an interesting way because I started talking about the Hey Brother podcast. About how I've been doing this and getting men to come onto the show. And I started posting a net page because one of our previous guests was a net alum and you're a net alum. And so that's one way that we're connected. And we chatted, maybe 2 weeks ago about coming onto the show. And it's really good to have you here. I'm glad to have you here on this and excited to get your story about who you are as a man, how brotherhood's impacted you out there. And so, maybe that's the natural place to kind of pick up in conversation for you. I mean, you're alluding to that ache of brotherhood. Maybe say more about that, but also, who is Jack? Who is this person that I'm talking to?
Okay, yeah. So Jack was born John James Lysite. So my mother, I was born cradle Catholic. I should start with that. And then sort of heading under that is the reason why I was named John James is because I was named after the sons of thunder, James and John from the Bible.
Nice.
So I coming out of the womb, I was destined to be loud and crazy and booming like thunder. So I was born April 14th, 1989. North Branford, Connecticut, which is a small little town, like 10, 15 minutes outside of New Haven. So it's right on the
Okay.
shoreline. So small New England town. Absolutely. And that's where I spent most of my life, really, until I was around 27 years old. And so I was born there. I'm an only child. So yes, Catholic only children, we do exist.
Yeah.
We're a thing, you know?
Yeah.
um,
Oh man.
yeah. So I was, I was raised Catholic because my mother was the director of religious education at our parish in North Branford.
Um,
She was director of religious ed for 32 years, and she herself graduated from Franciscan University of Steubenville in 1982. She was there she was one of the first classes where things sort of got cleaned up, and they sort of started like she was there in the first years of Father Mike Scanlon and all of that.
oh well.
So she graduated and first she was a high school religion teacher, then she became a DRE. So,
Man. So what was that?
yeah,
What was that like being an only child, and here you have a mom who's coming from? I guess it wasn't as illustrious at that time, but now it is like the Steubenville University, right? Where the Franciscan University, I should say, coming from there. What was that like having a mom religion teacher?
you know, it's funny because I still meet people today who went through the religious ed program for St. Augustine's, which was our parish. Now it's St. Ambrose
Okay.
because they merged with another parish, and it's a whole long drama. But um,
Sure.
I still have people today saying, "I swore your mom was a nun." Like I was convinced that she was a nun. And I'm like, well, she's definitely not a nun. I can promise you that. You know, she was never waking me
Yeah.
up at like 5 a.m. to do morning prayer or anything like that. Um, and it was is different for sure. And
Sure.
I grew up with a lot of people who have said, I grew up with a lot of people who their moms were nurses or their moms were some kind of professional or just like homemakers, and not a lot of people grew up, even like doing all the ministry I've done, have grown up with moms who were director of religious ed. And it was interesting. It was definitely people projected their assumptions about my mom on me.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really get exposed to, I guess, quote unquote, normal childhood, because
Sure.
people sort of shielded their true intentions. They shielded,
Mm.
if they were all talking about getting drunk on the weekend or whatever, when I'd come around, they'd like hush 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 hush, and
Yeah.
and
They
I've
didn't feel like it
gotten,
was safe to share that stuff around the religion teacher's son, right? Like the
yeah, and
step
it's
in.
like, yeah, it's, first of all, I'm not going to say anything,
Yeah.
but also, before I found Christ, I didn't really get dedicated to my faith until I was 14 years old. So in those formative, like, puberty years, I didn't want that. I wanted to be just like everybody else. I wanted to be treated just like everybody else.
Yeah.
So I was kind of annoyed that they would do that. Now there's another part of my story, which is sort of the core of what we were talking about before with Brotherhood.
Okay.
Um, my dad was an abusive father. He
Mm.
was in many different ways. I'll just
Sure.
say that the biggest ones were emotional and verbal.
Yeah.
And he had a lot of issues, a lot of trauma from his childhood, and it also was mixed with, when I was 2 years old, he was a garbage man, and he was involved in a car accident when I was 2 years old, and that brought an onset of bipolar disorder and schizophrenia.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that.
So, yeah, oh, thank you, I appreciate it. And so when that was sort of a thing, like when I was growing up, like I never knew my father pre-accident. I only knew him after the accident. I only remember him after the accident, and um, it was sort of the best way I can describe it is he was sort of like Harvey Two-Face from Batman. Like there were some
Yeah.
days where he was great and he
Hmm.
was, the father you wish you'd had, but half the other time, and then increasingly more often, he was not that person. And
Yeah.
it really built up a deep, deep mistrust of men in me from a very,
Yeah.
very young age.
Yeah.
Um, and then when my parents got divorced, when I was in sixth grade, so 2001, January actually of 2001, they separated and then they were divorced officially a year later. Um, First of all, that caused all kinds of drama on mom's front because works for the church. How can she get divorced?
Yeah.
That's pure contradiction. And now I realize and I educate people like, okay, first of all, divorce is not a sin because divorce isn't recognized by the church. So you can't
Right.
make something a
Yeah.
sin if it's not recognized. Um,
Sure.
but at the time, and just with the pure ignorance of people and like small town drama, they made
Yeah.
my mom out to be. I mean, they called my mom every name in the book except the woman of God. And
Man.
so mix that with just the natural angstiness of being a teenager, being a middle schooler in a
Yeah.
suburban America, and I hated the label that you're DRE kid.
Yeah.
And I was to a T because every single church dinner I had to serve and clean up with. I was there. I was at church for so much more than just mass on Sunday and CCD class, and everyone knew it. So even
Yeah.
if I tried to like break away from that rep, it still followed me
Yeah.
because I was always there in some way, in some capacity.
Man, that's really rough because it's like I thank you first for sharing. Like that's a lot. You've been through
Hmm.
in your life, and you made it a long way. Here we were talking about brotherhood, and you're sitting there talking about how like at one point you kind of disdained like masculinity or like just the idea of like male
Hundred
friendships and
percent.
stuff like that. And I'm excited to get into like how that transformation happened, but just starting
Hmm.
from this place of like yeah, like people automatically labeling you as a DRE son, people labeling your mom with what former boss of mine used to saying a lot, like a full time opinion with half time knowledge or part time knowledge, right? Right,
I
like
love
people
that.
don't,
Yeah.
yeah, they don't know the full story, and here they
Yeah.
are making assumptions, and like
Hmm.
you're desperate to run from that because it's just like this is the last thing I
Hmm.
want. I just want to be normal, quote unquote normal, right? Like
Yeah.
and every kid does at that age, right? They want to be
Hmm.
normal, and so thank you for sharing that. Like, it's really good. Like, helps like capture like, okay, where is Jack coming from, and his background, his life.
Yeah.
What was the next steps for you? Like, so you grew up there,
Hmm.
and then what?
Hey, if you're looking to grow in faith, fight self doubt, and step into the man God's created you to be, I've got something for you. As a way to thank you and every man listening to the Hey Brother podcast, I put together a free guide called 7 Tools for Becoming the Man God Has Made You to Be. It's a simple yet powerful resource to help you build stronger brotherhood, strengthen your faith, and live more radically free. To grab your free resource, go ahead and type tools in the comment section below. That's TOOLS, tools in the comment section below, or email me tools with the subject line at nick@crafterformore, and I'll send that document straight to you. Now back to the episode.
Yeah. So grew up there and went to public school from kindergarten to eighth grade. And so my dad left when like halfway through my sixth grade year. Divorce was finalized the summer of my seventh. So eighth grade was sort of we moved away from my childhood home because it
Okay.
just wasn't a healthy place to live in, with all of the memories that were there. I hated it, but I grew to love moving away very quickly afterwards. So we moved into a condo, just me and my mom. And so it
Okay.
was new house, new school year. I was determined to sort of break all those stereotypes, right? So I
Yeah.
was determined to sort of chart a new course for myself. And I did that by just sort of rebelling against what I had always been raised with, and part of that was strict, Irish Catholic upbringing. So started to experiment with drinking, started to smoke cigarettes, all of course, everything behind my mother's back,
Sure.
listening to music I wasn't allowed to listen to, um, TV and everything. And that exposed me to pornography and to all kinds of impure actions and everything. And my mom could tell that
Yeah.
that's what was happening, and again, on the surface, I was pretty much the same person to a lot of people. The divorce changed that for a good amount of people I knew. Um, but I still seemed like pretty straight. And I also consciously didn't want to go too far because I didn't
Yeah.
want to cause my mom's life to be that much more stressful. And she was already dealing with
Sure.
a lot of crap with my dad and with now her job. I mean, there were people that were saying she should be fired for being a
Yeah.
divorced woman
Wow.
working for the church. Legitimately, there were
Wow.
people calling for her job, calling the bishop, saying that
Yeah.
she does not deserve to work for the church as a divorced woman. But um,
Dang.
so again, I never did weed. I never did drugs. So
Sure.
I didn't want to make my mom's life that much harder.
Yeah.
Um,
There's like a line that you didn't want to cross, like as far as like
yeah.
deviant behaviors go. That's interesting
Mhm.
because it's just like, yeah, like one of the images that I'll use sometimes when I'm working with folks that comes to mind when you're talking. It's like you're like a duck on the outside. Like, have you ever seen that duck under the water with their feet?
Mhm.
Like they go crazy. They just start like
Yeah.
paddling, right? And then that's kind of like what we can feel like in life, where like everything
Yeah.
feels like we're graceful on the top of the pond, but underneath, like there's so many things that are like you're trying to solve for, a lot of shit that you went through, right? And it's just
For
like
sure.
drinking, porn, like whatever it is, like let me like have some sort of relief here. And but
Absolutely.
then like it's also like there's a line that you're talking about where it's like we don't want to go past this line because if I do, then how's
Mhm.
this gonna reflect on mom? And so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And so I was going down this path, and I was actually becoming more popular in eighth grade. I started
okay,
to make friends more, but again, this is a key part. I had maybe three or four true guy friends that year. I had hundreds of friends who were girls. Like I
yeah,
I was the guy like I was the guy that actually, it was weird. It was almost like a weird like desegregation moment. Usually in my school, the girls would sit with the girls and the guys would sit with the guys. I started sitting with the
sure,
girls and threw off the entire balance of power in the lunchroom, because I didn't trust guys, and I especially didn't
yeah,
trust guys who had been judging me my whole life as being DRE kid. So there were like three guys, and I played sports growing up. That was another core part of who I was. I played football,
okay,
basketball, baseball, got a little bit into soccer, and sports is the one constant in my life that has sort of been like a North Star. I
okay,
love sports. I love talking about sports. And so part of my journey was, I had all these friends and it was great, but I was also getting into really bad stuff. And my mom saw
yeah,
that and said, okay, I can't allow this to continue. So she had me take a couple of entrance exams to some of the Catholic schools in the area.
okay,
And lo and behold, I was accepted to Xavier High School in Middletown, Connecticut, and that would be the high school that I graduated from. And it was a Catholic school, but it was also an all boys Catholic high school.
okay,
And that was like, you might as well lock me away in a prison. Like you might like
yeah,
you might as well send me like an exile on Patmos, like John the Beloved, because that's how it felt to me. Was
yeah,
you're taking away the one social enjoyment that I've ever had, which was to be friends with girls. And
yeah.
yeah, so that was rough,
That's,
but
is that where you ended up going to the boys' school then?
I did. Yeah, I did. I
Yeah,
went there all 4 years. Graduated 2007, which feels like a lifetime away. Um,
sure,
But it was a blessing in disguise because it taught me a lot of things. It taught me, like, I would not have been dedicated in any way or shape or form to my studies, to life after high school. If I had gone to my public high school, I just would have been, cushy, and it would have been like dazed and confused for 4 years. Um,
Yeah.
but going to that school, being thrown out of my comfort zone, prepared me for not only life after high school, but like ministry life and being used to like get used to uncomfortable, get used to different. Um,
Yeah.
and it also sort of, indirectly paved the way for my conversion.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. I want to hear. I mean, I'm curious about the conversion aspect, but I'm also like, I also want to kind of pivot to like hearing about Brotherhood, and I think like from the little bit I know about your story, the two and two go hand in hand to some degree, and so take me into that. Where has Brotherhood, like, where does the like change start for Brotherhood, and like how much does getting to know the Lord play into that?
Yeah. So going into, so I converted my sophomore year of high school. Um, to that point, like I said, there were like three guys my age who I trusted. And I all met them from sports. So I think that's the first major key of brotherhood is a shared experience or a shared passion.
Yeah.
It's not just that you're on the same team, especially for football. I mean, it applies for all sports, but football especially. You suffer through a lot of crap with
Yeah. Oh yeah.
your teammates. You're all there on, like, the 3 days in high school, like in like the summer of like summer practices and stuff. You're suffering through all of that. You're dealing with all of that, and you come out the end of the tunnel at the end of that, and there's a shared brotherhood that's sort of like automatic. You know,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
could do things to build that up with other guys on your team, but it's already there. um, and
Yeah.
then I guess, sir, as far as older men, there was a deacon by the name of Bill Lovelace, who was my one of my saving graces as a kid. He
Okay.
worked with my mom, and he helped facilitate helping her get the divorce, and then afterwards getting an annulment, which came much later.
Sure.
But he was also instrumental in, like, he took me to visitation because I had supervised visitation for a while with my dad.
Okay.
But he was just there. He just supported. He was just
Man.
there, and there were other men that did little tiny things here and there throughout my getting through that whole situation that I was grateful for. But there was never a man that inspired me or called me to a higher form of masculinity until October 23rd, 2004. Um, it, we were having a retreat at my parish for the confirmation class ahead of me. But
Okay.
again, being a DRE kid, I went to, it didn't matter like what class was doing what, like I was there,
Sure.
and my mom had this way of getting me to come to church even when I didn't want to, especially when I didn't want to, and there was no way of me getting out of it. And this was one of those times where she's like, "I'm coming on this retreat. Like, I don't care. You're coming."
Period. Yeah.
So I was like, "Fine,
that's
whatever."
that's
Uh,
funny.
Well, it
You're one of
turns.
those kids that we all had because
Oh yeah.
that's what that does, right? Like do youth ministry retreats. There's always that one kid that's like, my mom made me go, right? Like at least a couple kids. That was you. That's
100%. I
awesome.
was I was the kid that sat in the back and made fun of all the speakers. Like,
Yeah.
if any Net alumni or any Life Team alumni are watching, yeah, that was me. I was making
Yeah.
fun of them and cracking jokes. Like, I've always been the funny guy. So yeah. So I go to this retreat, and it turns out it's a retreat put on by Hard as Nails Ministries, with
Oh
Justin
sure.
Topeka.
Yeah.
So some people have heard of him. I mean, he's kind of blown up now. He's done a bunch of things for EWTN and everything. But when he came to us, we were actually the first. We were the first church he came to outside of the state of New Jersey, which is where he started in Paramus, New Jersey. Um,
Okay.
so we were the first church outside of the state of New Jersey that he traveled to, and I'll never forget. I walked into this parish hall that I'd walked into 1,000 times before, and like it, and I was a pretty big kid. I was like 6'1", 280, like as a
Okay.
sophomore. So I was a big kid.
Yeah.
And this dude walks over who's like maybe 5'5" on a good day. And like definitely like he was like he was a swole 200, but he was like I was bigger than him. That's which is like the
Yeah.
point.
Sure.
Comes straight up to me and he wraps me in a hug and he's like, dude, I'm so happy you're here. I'm so excited. Praise God that you came. And it's Justin Fatica. And
Yeah.
I'm freaking out. I'm like, how many drugs is this guy on? And can I get some kind of thing? Like I was so blown away.
Yeah.
But again, back to like the conversation, he welcomed me. He went out of his way to welcome me. He didn't have to do that. He had a
Yeah.
thousand things going on at the time. As a person who's worked in ministry, I fully understand that at that point, he probably was waiting to hear from his, audio guy, and he's waiting to hear from the contact person for the retreat and trying to figure everything else out. He's got to help
Sure.
facilitate prayer with his team. But at that moment, I was the only thing that existed in the world. At that
Yeah.
moment, I was the only person that mattered. His calling hinged on me. And
Yeah.
I'd never been valued like that from a man ever in my life. And
Man, oh,
it
man.
it hooked me into that retreat. I didn't know what the retreat was about, but I was in. I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
100%. I was 100% in. And as the retreat went on, Hard as Nails is a little bit rougher around the edges than other ministries, and
Sure.
they
They
it's sort
tell us
of like
straight.
they go there. Yeah, they go there.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what I needed at that time, man. Like that's exactly what I needed. I needed to be knocked off my horse. I needed that like Paul of Tarsus moment where,
Right.
I just get rocked off my horse and get told this is what's what, and you're either gonna do this or you're not. And um halfway through the retreat, I remember when we were having lunch, I took my mom aside and I said, I just found what I want to do the rest of my life. Like looking at Justin, seeing what he was doing, seeing how excited he was. He was talking about the faith, and I'd heard hundreds of people talk about the faith and made fun of them for doing so. He was
Yeah.
the first one to do it in such a dynamic and exciting way.
Yeah.
It was extremely attractive. And I didn't know at that time that I was attracted to the Christ that was in him. I was attracted to
Mm,
the person, the holiness that he was exuding. He just happened to be exuding it in a very hip hop, like teen friendly way, and
yeah. Yeah.
which I'd never been exposed to before.
Do you think it
And
was? Do you think it was because he like greeted you that changed it, or
oh, 100%.
yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was the greeting. It was that I mattered to. He acted like he knew me 20 years. Like
Yeah.
what in that first meeting, he acted like, it wasn't cold. It wasn't sort of like herd them in like cattle. It
Sure.
was personal and it was, charitable and loving. It wasn't lovey dovey. It wasn't like,
Yeah.
women's ministries that like, hey love please, and like, oh my gosh you're so beautiful, and like, and that's great for women, that's beautiful for women.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that for me.
Yeah. But it's still
But
like affirming. I think it's like the key is
yeah,
like this moment where like somebody can see into like it's like no like I see you like I see you and like you're good like
yeah,
it's good
yeah,
that you're here, and as men like we need to hear that, right? It's not going to be like maybe years into our conversion or years into the process of like becoming more the saints that we're called to be, we can receive like that affirmation, oh you're beautiful, right? Like there's something as a man we can at some point receive that, but it's like
yeah.
but what we can resonates with our hearts the most is like this male figure coming and like just saying like, dude,
Hmm.
it's good that you're here. Like
Yeah.
and like to like make us feel seen, make us feel like we belong, make us feel like it's like that they're happy that we're here and that
Hmm.
like that our lives matter, right? Like
Yeah.
that gives it all the difference. And that's what you experienced with Justin and Hard as Nails ministry in that moment. And so that was the tone setter, right? Like that's
Yeah.
what changed everything.
That's what
And
changed everything. And
did
then,
you
and he
did you get a
had,
chance to live out that call, like to like because you said to your mom, I found what I want to do, and now like where did that lead you?
well, yeah. So another key to it as well is he had teenagers who traveled with him,
Okay.
and they helped put on the retreat, sort of like a net team, but they were all in
Yeah.
high school. And this one guy, his name was Sal. He walked up to me, and he was a football player. And like when football players see each other, like we recognize, like
Sure.
you've been there, you get it. And he walked right up to me and he shook my hand and we just started talking football for like 10 minutes. And I did not know this guy. He was from New Jersey. Like I had no exposure to
Yeah.
him whatsoever. And I felt welcomed. And I felt
Yeah.
like, and it was awesome. So after the retreat, I got prayed over for the first time. Thought it was going to freak me out, but it was actually quite calming and quite lovely. Um, And the first thing I did was send Justin an email after he
Okay.
left saying, I want to join you. I want to be on this team. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done anything like this before,
Yeah.
but I'm in. And,
Yeah.
so then about a month later, I was on a car trip because a couple other teenagers wanted to do it with me from my town. And we took a road trip to Abagnale, New Jersey. And
Okay.
we show up and now we're part of the team. And I did that for the rest of my high school. So for all of sophomore year, and all of junior year and some of my senior year, I was doing Heart and Nails events with Justin.
Yeah.
We went up to New Hampshire for Soul Fest, which is like a Christian contemporary Christian music festival.
Okay.
And while we were there was a film crew that was filming the festival itself for some other purpose. I introduced them to Justin, and by the end of that month or the month after, they ended up doing a documentary called Hard as Nails on Justin.
Wow.
And it premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival in New York City. And then it went on to it was made by HBO Films, was I think the distribution company.
Okay.
And to this day, you can look it up on HBO Max. Look up Hard as Nails. I'm in the movie. It's
Oh,
it's not
celebrity over
exactly
here.
well, yeah. I mean, 5 minutes of fame, right?
Exactly.
So I'm not exactly proud of myself because at that time also I thought I had to be like a clone of Justin Fatica to help
Sure.
people. So
I
I
think that's like
was,
totally like a part of a lot of guys' conversions, right? We're
yeah,
like we're sold, and then it's like I gotta be the guy that sold me, right?
yeah,
And like
yeah,
it's easy. I mean, you even see it in the Bible, right? Like where you, like I'm. It's not Paul who saved you. It's not Peter who saved you. It's not Timothy who saved you, right? It's Jesus, and
mhm,
like, but like we fall into that, 2,000 years later, we
mhm,
still like buy into that, and it's not like a bad thing, right?
yeah.
Like
No,
but
it's
it's not the best thing, right? It's not like what we're actually made for.
mhm. I mean, it's sort of like, if you get into a field because you really love this person, you want to be like that person because your exposure of that field is them. Like if you want to be
Yeah.
a quarterback, you want to be like Tom Brady and,
Right.
in every way and drink whatever Tom Brady drinks for breakfast or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not until you realize you can only be the best version of you. And,
Right.
and that's what God's calling you to be because you don't know who needs you out in the world. There was this beautiful quote that I picked up when I was in Net, Australia. They have a lot of like sidewalk art and graffiti art, and somebody had painted this phrase saying, "Never hide yourself. You have no idea who's dying to see them." It was a quote by C.S. Lewis. So it was you never know who's dying to meet them. And it was a quote by
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis, and that was huge, and that really confirmed in my heart that like when I was trying to be like Justin, I was just trying to be holy. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that. I was striving for holiness without knowing that that's the word for it. And
Right.
it wasn't until years later where I realized God's calling me to be me. He's calling me to be me and to minister to his children and to bring his children back to him through this vessel. As broken and as, faulty as it is, he's still trying to use me in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is an awesome, like, kind of realization, right? Like, to get to that point where, because I think at first it's exciting, right? Like, the faith thing. Like, my life has been kind of shitty. Like, to quote Paul, right? Life shit without Christ. and, like, and then it's like, whoa, like, life could be a lot better and more exciting. And like, you start to live this high, and then it's like, it's almost like you do like this such a sharp 180 and you leave like behind a lot of like the past hurts, and some of that gets healed, but like it's still like part of what makes you you. It's like Christ came back from the dead with his wounds still, right? And like that's what we got to take into our conversion. So it's like it's so easy to like get excited, and it's like that's such a great part of our faith like journey is to be in that area of excitement. But like, and I love to hear how you're talking, and I thank you for sharing this because it's really humble to say like, yeah, like I can look back at that film and like part of me is like, yeah, I was in a film with Justin, that's great, but another like what was I doing back then? Like like who was I? But the place,
my wife won't watch that. I showed her that movie one time. She's like, never again, never again. It was so crazy.
That's awesome. But it's, I mean, like it's like a part of our stories as men and our conversion, like that we go through that period where it's like almost like this hardcore 180 and disassociation from anything we felt pain from before in the past to this place where you're on the other side of it and you're starting to live in a more integrated way and like an accepting way. Like, yeah, I have my wounds, but like God's calling me to still love people through that. And like I've heard Justin speak before. He's like really good at like preaching that. At least the times I've like listened to him, he's like, if God could use a jerk like me, he could use anyone, right? Like that's what we're called to as men. So that's awesome to hear. That's how your story kind of unraveled. I mean, started and then like folded out, unfolded into like giving yourself in ministry. And so like Net was a part of that. Net Australia was a part of that. What was it? 3 years of Net that you did?
Yeah. So I sort of have to condense like 10, 15 years into like a minute, but basically, I graduated in 2007 and I was determined to be maybe not the next Justin Fatica, but the next Jason Everett, Chris Stefanik, who, what have you. So that path, it quote unquote path is you go to Franciscan University of Steubenville and you get your degree in catechetics and theology. And at some point, eventually you will meet your wife probably while you're there. So you'll graduate with, $100,000 in debt and, rent a house probably for the next 10 years, like while you pay off that debt, working as youth minister and then doing speaking engagements at Steubenville conferences and parish youth retreats and stuff like that. That was what I wanted to do. So I went to Franciscan and I failed out after 2 years. And I was going to Franciscan, and again, expectation is a thief of joy, and I was expecting the same welcoming and the same sort of level of charity that I experienced with Hard as Nails, and I didn't experience that. My first day I was there, I said that I'm an only child, and my mom was divorced, and the first thing somebody said to me was, "You're not much of a Catholic, then, are you?"
Oof.
And I was blown away. And I should have known, like, I should have taken that at face value, but I didn't. I just, you know what? It's fine. It's whatever. But, so I failed out and I own that. Like, I own that part of the story. But Franciscan, I experienced some of the worst bullying of my life at Franciscan and mocking, especially from other guys.
Yeah.
It
So
was
like
rough.
Re-aggravating those dad wounds, those brotherhood
all
wounds.
those wounds just getting ripped. It's sort of I sort of compare it to when Jesus was scourged and they put that robe over him, and then when they ripped it off, like when they're going to crucify him, they opened up all those wounds all over again. That's what it felt like at Franciscan, and it's hard. I don't even really talk about going to Franciscan that much anymore. It's like the least part of my story, um,
Sure.
because when I mention Franciscan, a lot of people just get um, they just want to talk about their experience with Franciscan.
Yeah.
So I sort of disappear as soon as I say, well, yeah, I attended Francis, and then they cut me off like, oh my gosh, I love what they do with this, and I went to this conference,
Yeah.
and that's beautiful, and that's great, and that's part of their story.
Right.
Positivity about Franciscan is not part of my story, and so
Yeah.
I just rather just don't bring it up because I don't want to go back to that place. I don't want to go back to you know spending how much money on tuition and failing out. Um,
Yeah.
and so after that, I did youth ministry back in my home parish. I helped out with the youth, the like sort of the birth of youth ministry and youth culture at my parish. Did that for a couple of years, um, and just kind of just doing that and working jobs here and there, like certain like customer service jobs and stuff like that. Um, and then, so that all kind of followed until our parish was made into a cluster. And what they did was then they liquidated everybody else's jobs. So my mom, all of those jobs that, were at the parish before, they were all
Sure.
liquidated. And then they had to hire brand new, sort of just make it all
Wow.
fair, between the two parishes. So I didn't really know what to do after that, ministry wise. So I was and I was also at the time I was in a very toxic relationship. Just life was pretty bad around 2016, and it was at that time
Yeah.
that I crossed paths, ironically, with a couple of people who were on net. And
Okay.
this one guy handed me that famous little business card that said how to apply,
Sure.
and he said you should apply, see what happens.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel qualified or like I didn't feel worthy to do any ministry at that point. But I
Right.
was like, okay, and again, it was sort of like all those wounds got opened up at Franciscan from father wounds, but the hunger for holiness and the hunger for like true masculine, like Christ-centered, like manism, was getting woken in me just by thinking about doing
Yeah.
that, right? So I applied and I went out to do like my come and see weekend. Absolutely loved it. It reminded
Yeah.
me of all the things I loved about Hard as Nails, all the things I loved about doing youth ministry back in my hometown. And I was chosen to do net. And when I came out to do net, like again, that same desire of like as soon as I got to the net center and I started seeing everybody there, I was all in. I just dove in. I was all
That's
in.
awesome.
And I was
That's
just
awesome.
like, this is what I want to do. Like, I didn't know when they were going to take our phones away from us, but I literally found Dave Rinaldi, who's now I think he's the executive
President?
director. Yeah, he's the president of NET.
Yep.
At the time, he was sort of the director of programming.
Yep.
And I handed my phone. I said, here, I don't know when we're supposed to hand our phones in, but what I've seen so far, I just want to dive in right now. Just take my phone. I'm done. I'm done with that world. I'm done with that craziness, stuff like that. And yeah, and then during the course of training, especially men's days,
Yeah.
that went towards actually healing those wounds. Not covering them, not ignoring them, not pretending this is okay because no, like it's sort of like the Holy Spirit and Jesus came to me and literally like put salve on every single wound
Yeah.
and took time to
Let's-
look at every single one.
Yeah, let's hang on that just for a minute because I think there's something really powerful about authentic brotherhood and its ability to help us like
Mhm.
really become more the men we're called to be. As particularly like, and again, thank you so much for sharing your story about like the wounds you received from your father because it's relatable. Every man's story is different, and the wounds that we get from our parents are different and to greater or lesser degrees. And there's really no comparing, but there also is this aspect of like it is super relatable. Like there's so many ways that we have been hurt by our dads, even like our really good dads. Like, and And unfortunately, that your dad had his own wounds and wasn't able to be a good dad in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
and that sucks. But it's like, let's sit with that for a minute. Like, what was it about the men's session, like in net, that like you felt like was moving the needle? That you felt like was actually like, helping you heal?
Yeah, I totally I would echo that message to all of the guys that I, would do ministry, like when we do, men's sessions in ministry. I say we all have broken fathers. Like we all have
Yeah.
father wounds. Some of us, that the form of that takes is we haven't met our fathers or we haven't talked to our fathers in years. Some of
Yeah.
us, we live with the man, but we hardly know who he is because he's working 80, 90 hours a week. Some
Right.
of us, he's there and we know he loves us or supports us. He just doesn't know how to demonstratively show that in a way that we can accept that. Whatever the situation is, we have a father wound and we need to address
Right.
it with a steadfast call, a striving for our heavenly father's love,
Yeah.
because he is the perfect father. So
Right.
but during men's days, what I was struck with was that I wasn't here while everybody else was up here, which is definitely what I felt like at Franciscan. Even though it wasn't the
Yeah.
case, that is the sort of the company line, like meet us up here. When I was at Net, I was here and everybody else was here with me. And we journeyed together. It was slow. Sometimes
Yeah.
it was incrementally slow process, but all of us found a way to grow in holiness in some way. Or, I mean, there were guys that left Net that didn't finish the journey they started with us, like that first day we showed up. But we all sort of were like, we admitted to each other, like the first night of men's days, that when we had this big bonfire at it used to be at Camp Wampa. They're going to a new camp starting this year, but
Right.
at Camp Wapagassa in Wisconsin, we had this big, huge bonfire, and we just had this beautiful session of all these guys admitting, like, I'm not that great. Like
Yeah.
I'm broken. I've got these issues. I've got this, I talked about how like I have body issues and, and I always have, especially around men.
Yeah.
And I have issues with being around other guys. And I'd much rather not have to do that. I'll do it if I have to, but and we
Yeah.
all admitted that to each other and we admitted we were broken. And it, like, immediately after that, we went into mass, which
Yeah.
that was beautiful because, like, okay, we're all broken. And now we're going to offer that brokenness at the foot of the cross.
Yeah.
You know,
That's awesome. That's not,
yeah.
there's something like super, like I find myself like both inspired and like daunted. Like I went through that, and so I experienced a lot of the same things you experienced. But even now, like here in the present moment, like looking at that experience, I'm inspired because it's like I know in the heart of hearts, like that's what I'm made for, is that kind of vulnerability. But at the same time, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, dang, that's like scary. Like to put it out there, even if everyone else is doing it, still to have like the courage to be like, yeah, no, I'm broken too. But it's through like that brokenness that like we really become the saints that we're called to be. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's only through that we actually aspire to being the men that we want to be. And as long as we're running from that, like that's problematic because we're really running from like this deeper calling of living through that
Yeah.
woundedness and being a gift of self to others. And so, and then yeah, the culmination of bringing that into mass is like awesome, right? Like here you are, it's like here you go, Lauren. Like this is it. I've been running for a long time, but this is it. This is what I've been running from, and I want to give it to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you know, that we're in small groups throughout all of training.
Right.
That small group was also very instrumental in sort of reintroducing my heart to being with other men and being exposed to men, good, bad, and ugly. And
Yeah.
I got prayed over with my small group, and that really was the moment that I truly could tell that I was being healed from a lot of those wounds with men, wounds with peers, like guys who were like my peers as well. Really healing my heart, and it went a long way towards building me up. And then once we were on the road, being being good with your brothers and being upfront and close with your brothers allows you to then love your sisters on your team. It's that much
Yeah.
better and that much more. And then all of that culminates in being able to do ministry in a more uh, effective and a way with integrity.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's like, yeah, the more we can get in touch with that, and there's even like some developmental psychology that plays into that. There's like
Hmm.
Sullivan. I don't know if you've heard of him as a
Hmm. Yeah.
psychologist. So there's Sullivan and there's gosh, Erickson are like the two developmental psychologists that people know the most about.
Hmm.
And Sullivan's more interpersonal. So like what you're saying about like as soon as I started to know the men better, that unleashed me to go to the women. And there's something very like anthropologic about it too, like what relates to us being
Yeah.
human. It's like we almost have to figure out how a relationship with a man works before we can begin to ponder what a relationship with a woman looks like.
Yeah.
And sometimes it gets intertwined and intermixed in there, but that's really good because it's like, and that's probably taking a psychodynamic look at it, going too far down that angle. Because like when you simplify it and just look at it, like you're becoming the saint God's calling you to be, like
Yeah.
that allows you to live more a free life, a more confident life, right? Like a more
Hmm.
confident, like in my masculinity, more confident in like the way God's working through these wounds. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. There's a lot more to your story with that and everything like that that I think we talked about a little bit on the phone prior to this podcast episode, and so I know there's more to unpack, but I kind of want to shift gears here right at the end. Maybe have you come back on for another episode sometime to
Sure.
unpack Brotherhood on that a little bit more.
Hmm.
But I'm gonna like ask a couple questions. One, like how do you want to grow as a man, and then two, um, are you out there on like social media? I usually like plug people towards the end. If I don't know if there's anything people can follow you on if they want to follow you. Um,
Not,
but those are the
yeah, not right now. I'm working on stuff. So if you want to follow like my Instagram, it is, let me bring it up. Um, I'm trying to figure out exactly what I want to do. And me and my wife, we want to, so yeah, I'm married 3 years in March. Um, we want to have more of a social media presence attached to our
okay.
ministry. So like we help out with our local parishes youth ministry program. It's actually quite big. It's quite large, and
Yeah.
we come and we do talks, at retreats and stuff like that. But we also want to have a social media ministry of sorts. We're
Okay.
trying to work on that right now. But if anybody wants to follow me, they can. So my name on Instagram is Jack JACK dot John JOHN dot Lysite LYSAGHT. So it's just Jack John Lysite, and
Sweet.
they can
I'll
follow
throw
me.
that in the show notes so people can click on it easily. So
Yeah, yeah. So that's good. And also, so yeah. So what I want to grow in as a man is sort of accepting. So I never became that famous Catholic speaker. If anybody was confused about, no, why haven't I seen him at student book conferences? Uh, that that wasn't God's plan for me. I've made peace with that. That's what it is.
yeah.
Um, but I want to be. There's something else that God's calling me to be. Right now I'm called to go back to college. I'm going back to school. I already got my associate's degree, and I'm going for my bachelor's in electronic media. And I think that the Lord is calling me to be part of sports journalism, sports broadcasting. I got a side gig, a side hustle while I was engaged. I was doing play-by-play calls for a radio station down here in Texas for a Catholic
Okay.
school, a Catholic high school. So I was calling Catholic high school football, which is incredibly ironic given my story that I just talked about. And I loved it so much. And my at the time my fiance, now my wife, heard my call, and she said, "This is your future career. Like you're so good at this. Like this is
Yeah.
definitely what you should focus on." And so I know that that's sort of my calling right now is to get that degree, and then, but from there on, like, what are you calling me to, Lord? If it's not youth ministry, if it's not being a Catholic speaker, how do you want me to build up that ministry? Do you want me to sort of lay low and kind of do like, interpersonal relationships with, men and what have you? Or do you want me to find another ministry? So just the docility of the Holy Spirit building up in me and allowing me to be more attentive to what the Lord is calling me to.
Yeah, so kind of like almost like a surrender of sorts to whatever that plan is. I think it's easy to kind of, begin to put expectations and build plans. And I think there is a healthy level of hopefulness for these things, but sometimes we place like a lot of stock in like the expectation or plans, even like for like a little meta analysis of like this podcast, right? Like I hope that this thing like gets out there and a lot of guys get to listen to it and it's blessing guys and like guys are commenting and like there's ways that this helps guys grow. That's my hope. And maybe God blesses that and makes it come to fruition. But I'm like, a lot of times I obsess about that and make that my identity. It's like my identity is about the success of this podcast. When the reality is, it's like, no, it's about like who God says I am. And that might be me trying a podcast and a year from now deciding like, okay, God put that in my life for a reason. And maybe he's calling me to something else. Or maybe it is a successful podcast. I don't know. We'll see.
I mean, from a Catholic perspective, the first thought, the first step towards leaving the church is, I think God wants for my life what I want for my life. Like, cause that's the first step towards, okay, you're not here for God's, like, you're not here for God's will. You're trying to graft God's will onto your will. And God almost never wants what you think you're supposed to be doing. It's almost never a carbon copy of what God wants you to do.
Right.
It's only until you truly start following God, then you can discover his will for you. And then, and in doing so, you realize that while what you wanted at the time seemed like good, you realize that God's will was so much better because he knows you so much better than you know yourself. And, I did not think I'd have to wait until I was 31 years old to meet my future bride. And I am so freaking happy that I did, because my life would not have been as fulfilled as it is now if I had settled, if I had, just gone the path of least resistance. I would not end up with the truly satisfying love that I have with her had I not done that. So,
man, what a testament to God's providence. And thank you, Jack, for being on the podcast and for sharing. And that last bit about wanting to grow and just trusting God all the more, surrendering to his will, letting ourselves be stripped of that, and like just whatever you have, Lord, that openness, growing in that's a beautiful testament and like inspiring to me and a lot of men out there, I'm sure. And just wanted to thank everyone else who is listening to the podcast right now. Thank you guys so much. If this has been a blessing to you and you've been listening for a little bit, I really invite you to subscribe. That helps us get this content out in front of more Catholic men and helps us just give a pulse on like what people are enjoying from this. Like if this is more content that you want, men telling their stories, real stories, subscribe. So that way we can continue this great work and continue to help men become who they are. Like it's a journey. We're all in this journey together and we want to invite you guys into it. You guys can throw comments down below what you guys think about this episode and share this with a brother. So with that, we'll catch you guys next time and God bless.